In a world where social interactions feel like a complex game, and the desire to fit in often overshadows individuality, the question arises, what lies behind the facade of accepted norms? If you've ever felt uncomfortable in a conversation, wondered at the lengths people go to conform, or sensed the futility of social rituals, this topic may resonate with you. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, known for his pessimistic view of the world, argued that many people live in a kind of charade. They choose their clothes, mannerisms, and speech not based on their true beliefs, but on a desire for the approval of others. But a legitimate question arises. Whose approval are they seeking? Consider how many times you've had to engage in empty talk just to avoid seeming rude. How many times have you had to fake laughter at an unfunny joke? How often have you felt that every interaction in society is a transaction where you have to give away a part of yourself in exchange for a sense of belonging? But the most important question to ask is, what is the cost of such conformity? What is lost when a person abandons their authenticity for the sake of approval? Arthur Schopenhauer convincingly argued that there is a deep contradiction between outstanding intellect and successful social adaptation. The higher the level of mental development, the more clearly the absurdity of many social conventions becomes apparent. This is not due to arrogance, but to the ability to see hidden motives and the true nature of things. A discerning mind distinguishes falsehood in the masks of courtesy, hypocrisy lurking behind words, and realizes how fragile the world is where everyone desperately seeks approval in the eyes of others. The saddest thing is realizing that most people prefer to ignore this reality. Society, by its very nature, seeks to entertain, not to stimulate thinking. Excessive reflection leads to the discovery of inconsistencies and contradictions. It reveals an understanding of the superficiality of most relationships, the meaninglessness of empty talk, and that striving to conform to accepted norms is a form of self-destruction. A dilemma arises. The intellect sufficient to recognize these things inevitably leads to a sense of loneliness. The deeper the reflections, the harder it is to find one's place in society, and others sense this. People feel detached from the collective hysteria, unwilling to participate in social rituals with blind devotion. This causes discomfort because the very existence of a person who thinks independently becomes a threat to the illusory world in which they live. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, once remarked that loneliness is the inevitable companion of all outstanding minds. This statement may evoke painful feelings, because society instills from an early age that happiness lies in communication, in a circle of friends, and in a sense of belonging to society. But what happens when most of these connections turn out to be superficial and meaningless? What happens when you realize that the price of socialization is the abandonment of your own uniqueness and immersion in a gray mass? At such moments, a person begins to seek something more, turns to their inner world, and begins to value personal time above the approval of others. And here an amazing transformation takes place. Loneliness, which at first seems like a heavy burden and punishment, gradually turns into a valuable privilege. It is in solitude that a person discovers what society is trying so hard to hide: peace of mind and harmony with oneself. Schopenhauer, like no other, understood this dilemma. For him, high intelligence was not only a gift, but also a kind of curse. The deeper a person knows the world, the less appealing they find it. The clearer they see human nature, with all its weaknesses and flaws, the less desire they have to participate in the pointless game imposed by society. It is a common misconception that such a philosophy preaches misanthropy, calls for the severing of social ties, and universal alienation. In reality, it is about a more subtle distinction between spontaneous communication and imposed obligations. It is the conscious right of the individual to independently determine their circle of acquaintances and the time spent in society, without regard to accepted norms and the expectations of others. It is the recognition of the self-sufficiency of the intellect, which does not need constant external validation. It is interesting to observe how the attitude of others changes when a person ceases to strive for universal approval. The absence of a desperate desire to fit into the group independence from the opinions of others, and a willingness to survive the absence of an invitation to a social event do not go unnoticed. This position disconcerts most people, who are used to living in captivity to the need to be recognized, heard, and approved. A person who transcends the boundaries of this game becomes an enigma, inspiring both fear and intrigue. The paradox lies in the fact that the less an individual cares about social approval, the more power they wield over it. True freedom begins the moment the opinions of others cease to be the defining factor. The next time someone tries to convince you of the need for greater sociability, for striving to conform to generally accepted norms, remember, your individuality is not a flaw. You simply possess a unique perspective on the world, and the truth you see may be too uncomfortable for most. And that's where it gets interesting. Realizing that social validation is not a necessity, and understanding that most social interactions are merely theatrical performances, you begin to notice the value of silence. Silence becomes your faithful ally, which often frightens those around you. After all, the modern world is filled with incessant noise, social media, empty chatter, news feeds striving to provoke an immediate reaction. All of this is designed to maintain constant distraction. Silence, on the other hand, forces reflection. And reflection can be dangerous for those accustomed to superficiality. Arthur Schopenhauer not only understood this, but lived according to this principle. He spent most of his life away from society, immersed in philosophy, music, and contemplation. This was not out of the hatred for people, but out of the realization that worldly noise only clouds the mind. This is a common mistake. People often confuse solitude with isolation. However, there is a vast difference between these concepts. Solitude is a manifestation of strength, a conscious choice of depth over superficiality, quality over quantity. Isolation, on the other hand, is a state where a person strives to fit into society but cannot, yearns for recognition but does not receive it. And here's the paradox. The one who desperately seeks recognition often finds themselves rejected, while the one who consciously rejects it will never be truly alone. By following your own path, not caring about the approval of others, you attract those who truly matter. People capable of thinking, asking questions, and not needing to fill every second of their lives with meaningless noise. Indeed, the assertion that intelligence leads to asociality is erroneous. Rather, intelligence exhibits a dislike for triviality and banality. Consider the great geniuses of the past. They were not hermits, but they also did not want to waste precious time on pointless conversations. Leonardo da Vinci could delve into his research for years without feeling the need to share every discovery with others. Friedrich Nietzsche, realizing that his philosophical views caused discomfort to most, preferred seclusion. Nikola Tesla worked on his inventions with maniacal devotion, which puzzled many. All of them were perceived as eccentric, quirky, and complex individuals. Why? Because they did not conform to generally accepted standards and did not follow prescribed social scripts. The whole point is that social life is often a set of predictable rituals designed to keep the individual within the system. From birth, a person is instilled with the idea that the recognition of society is the highest value, that it is necessary to have friends and be part of a collective, and that isolation is something negative. However, what is not mentioned is that many social groups are formed out of fear of loneliness, not on the basis of genuine closeness. Often, people surrounded by many acquaintances experience inner emptiness. It is important to remember that the most revolutionary ideas, great discoveries, and significant breakthroughs are born in minds that dare to abstract themselves from the general hustle and bustle. However, there's a common misconception that confuses many. Some believe that the panacea lies in complete renunciation of society, in turning into a recluse, cut off from worldly vanity and choosing the path of absolute isolation. But this is a mistaken opinion. True strength lies not in fleeing from reality, but in the ability to skillfully navigate it, knowing when to engage in interaction and when it is better to stay away. True power is the ability to act inconspicuously, like a shadow, when there's too much noise around, and to appear with devastating force at the right moment. Consider the great strategists. They were not always at the epicenter of the battle, but when they entered the game, their influence became undeniable. People who have grasped the true essence of life are neither slaves to public opinion nor fugitives from it. They are quiet players, skillfully moving their pieces on the chessboard of life without advertising their intentions. They build their empires in the shadows, and when the world finally realizes they exist, it's too late, as they have already triumphed without drawing undue attention to themselves. Schopenhauer argued that superior intellect is destined for solitude, not as punishment, but rather as a valuable advantage. It is in solitude that one finds the opportunity to create something truly significant and lasting, undisturbed by external stimuli and fleeting trends. But what happens to those who do not realize this truth? What fate awaits those who mistakenly believe that happiness can only be found in the approving glances of others? They, unfortunately, find themselves drawn into a vicious cycle of dependence, where their every action is dictated by a thirst for recognition. Every published photograph, every told story, every expressed opinion, all of this is carefully calculated with a single goal: to elicit a reaction, to get the coveted like, to read an encouraging comment, to feel confirmation of their significance, which creates the illusion of existence. However, herein lies the harsh truth of life. If your existence depends entirely on the opinions and reactions of other people, then you have never truly lived. You become merely a reflection of others' expectations, a puppet in the hands of public opinion, which is the complete opposite of freedom. True freedom does not lie in unbridled indulgence of one's whims, nor in the ability to do whatever one pleases without any consequences. It lies in the absence of the need for anyone's approval to realize one's true desires. Genuine freedom is not dependence on external noise needed to feel alive. It is the ability to remain alone with oneself in complete silence, without experiencing anxiety and without seeking to fill every pause with distractions. If a person is not capable of this, then they are not free. They are a prisoner of intrusive noise that drowns out their own self. Arthur Schopenhauer understood the value of solitude like no other. He distanced himself from worldly bustle not out of a sense of animosity, but rather for strategic reasons. Only from a respectful distance does the opportunity open to see reality in its true light, and only in silence can one hear one's own inner voice. If a person comes to such an understanding, it indicates that somewhere deep down, they already sensed something was amiss, felt the meaninglessness of many aspects of modern social life, noticed that most interactions had turned into empty formalities, and realized that true personal growth occurs not in the noise and clamor, but in the process of self-analysis and introspection. The question is, will there be enough courage to accept this fact? After all, once this happens, there is no turning back. Superficial conversations will begin to seem absurd. The need for approval from others will gradually wane, and only pure, unadulterated truth will remain. The truth is that solitude is not a punishment, but a valuable privilege available only to those who possess sufficient inner strength to bear its burden. One can no longer deceive oneself, feigning enjoyment of what once seemed normal, pretending that empty conversations bring satisfaction, or attaching importance to external praise. And this becomes a point of no return. This may seem frightening because most people spend their lives trying to fit into society, sacrificing their true desires and beliefs for the sake of universal recognition, suppressing parts of their personality so as not to cause discomfort to others. But now, having gained awareness, one can no longer act in this way. One has grasped a truth inaccessible to most. Life is not about striving to conform to accepted norms, but about finding what truly resonates with the soul and having the courage to follow one's own path, even if it means walking alone. And here's the cruelest paradox. The more one dares to be oneself, the stronger one's magnetism becomes. In the modern world, people desperately need sincerity and authenticity, but few possess enough courage to be authentic. And it is those who are not afraid to move forward without needing anyone's approval who become leaders and role models. But this happens not because they strive for power or recognition, but because true freedom is such a rare and unique phenomenon that it cannot be ignored. So, before every person who has read this information, the question inevitably arises: what to do next? To close one's eyes to the revealed facts, as if this video never existed, and return to one's habitual existence, continuing to participate in the general charade and adapting to externally imposed frameworks. This is one path. However, there is also an alternative, much more difficult option. This path requires embracing uncomfortable truths, acknowledging that most will never understand, and refusing to betray your own convictions to meet others' expectations. It's a path of living for yourself, not for others. Ultimately, the world is divided into those who conform and those who discover themselves. Most choose the former, as it seems easier, more comfortable, and safer. But only a few who choose the latter are capable of leaving a significant mark on history. Therefore, everyone must ask themselves, to which type of person do they belong? If the viewer has reached this point, the authors encourage them to leave a comment with the phrase, "Silence is power," which will serve as a sign of belonging to those who are ready to play the game of life by their own rules. And if this video resonated, if at any point there was a feeling that the author was describing something intimate, something that has always been felt but never expressed, then this is just the beginning of the journey.